Let's do the other one. Go back after more.
All right, welcome. Thank you so much for having me. Like Cheryl said, I am a master gardener from way back in the day. I was trying really hard to remember what year I got my master gardener certification, and I have like a time frame. She told me that somebody would probably fact check me, so let me know if I'm wrong. But I thought we would start. Oh gosh, hopefully we'll start. He had me set my, oh, there we go. I'm gonna start by telling you we're here to talk about cut flowers. So hopefully you're here for the right thing. If you're here to talk about worm composting, I know very little about it, so I won't be able to help. But just a little introduction about myself, and then we're gonna talk about why we grow flowers, how we get the best cut flowers, how we get the longest lasting stems on our cut flowers, what flowers you should grow to cut. I'm going to give you a little bit of resources if you have some questions, and then a Q&A at the end, but I'm happy to take questions as I go. So I'm going to try to get through a lot of different things, and I didn't record myself, or I didn't time myself doing this, so hopefully we make it through, but I might speed myself along, or if you have questions, please feel free. Okay, so I grew up in Corvallis. I went to Crescent Valley, go Raiders. I also graduated from OSU, go Beavs. I have a bachelor's of science in environmental science and botany. So I've been in this horticulture world for 30 plus years. I started when I was in college. I went to college thinking I'd be a journalist. Turns out that's, uh-oh. Okay, did it come back?
Yeah.
Okay. That's really hard, and I really liked getting my hands dirty. So I transitioned to horticulture in college. I worked at nurseries. So I worked at Garland Nursery for a lot of years. If you're from Corvallis, about 30 years ago, if you bought shrubs or trees at Garland Nursery, it was maybe from me. I think that was about the time I got my Master Gardener certification. I think that it was in 1998, maybe 1997, somewhere in there. I took it as really as like a Garland offered to pay for it. And I thought, oh yeah, sure, cool. That's great. I'm a poor college student. I have no money. I am not doing anything to make it do that. So I don't know what's happening. But now I transitioned to farming about 25 years ago, 30 years ago. I started with veg farming. And then about 25 years ago, I transitioned to flower farming. So I've been flower farming as my sole income. Hi, Jenny. For as my sole income for the last 15 years. And then my husband is also on my farm full-time now as of 2020. So we are fully supported by our cut flower farm, which is challenging in its own right, but it's very satisfying also. It's hard to work with your spouse, just putting it out there. So what do we do with all of our cut flowers? We went to farmers market here in Corvallis for 25 years, so you may recognize me from there. I went to every Saturday market and lots of Wednesday markets for like 20 plus years, and I loved it, but it just ended up being not the right direction for my business. So I sell most of my flowers wholesale into Portland and Seattle. We're members of the Seattle Wholesale Growers Cooperative, which is a cooperative of 18 farms throughout the Northwest. We all own a business together. It's housed in a building in Georgetown in Seattle, which is just north of SeaTac. And it is a shopping resource for event designers, florists, and overall like flower lovers in the Seattle area. We also belong to a market in Portland that's the same thing. It's called the Oregon Flower Growers Association. So if you are a florist or an event designer in the Portland area, you go to the flower market to buy flowers, and we have flowers there to sell you. So I serve on the board of directors of the Oregon Flower Growers Association, and I just am coming off of a board stint on the ASCFG board, which is the Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers. So we are an international organization based in education and activism for cut flowers and the American grown cut flower trade. So I'm also a mom and a master procrastinator. I finished this last night at about 10 o'clock, right as my kids were supposed to be going to bed. But it is all resulting in beautiful flowers. So let's get into it. So why do we grow flowers? How many of you grow flowers? Yeah. How many of you grow flowers to cut them? How many of you grow flowers to have pretty things in your yard? Yeah. How many of you grow them for pollinators? To give away? To make pretty things with? Right. Totally. Like there's no one reason to grow flowers, right? When we're growing veggies, why do we grow veggies? To eat them, right? we grow flowers for all of the reasons, and there's no wrong reason to grow flowers. We find that growing flowers can be incredibly satisfying. It's also a total adventure because every year we get to grow different things. Every year, especially in my business, trends change. One year I can sell every single white flower that I can grow, and the next year everybody wants yellow. That has not happened yet, but I anticipate that someday everyone will want yellow. So I have a lot of gratuitous, pretty pictures of flowers. So if there's anything that you're like, what is that? Let me know. Like I said, I grow mostly for events and design work. So you're going to see that a lot of the flowers that I grow have a very specific tonal kind of color palette. Like these ones, I don't think I have a pointer, but that's my daughter Beatrice on the right. And she's got this like very pastel palette of zinnias, which are in high demand. But I'm finding that like this rich, saturated, bold color palette is also getting increasingly popular, which I am all here for. I love the bright colors. We grow a lot of dahlias on our farm, so you're going to see a lot of pictures of dahlias. This is peaches and cream dahlia. It's one of the, is like the quintessential best-selling dahlia that I grow by far. So a lot of people think of flowers as going into bouquets, right? And that's one way that you can use dahlia or use flowers. You can also just have statement flowers, right? Like just big, bold. So if you're thinking about why you want to grow flowers, what do you want? Like, what do you like? You should grow flowers because you like the flowers. So if you just don't like pink flowers, don't grow pink flowers. If you like gigantic, big, bold statement flowers, grow them. If you're more of like a wispy wildflower kind of lover, then that's what your grow list should be, right? So we grow for grocery stores, which is why you see all of these flowers that look exactly the same. We grow for grocery stores in Portland. So if you've ever been into a New Seasons in Portland, you may have bought our flowers in the summertime. We also fell into some grocery stores in Seattle. And you can see that like the difference between that dahlia over there that's very washed out and it's beautiful. It's called Kamano Zoe. She's a beautiful dahlia. She's very blush and very subtle, and you would put it in a wedding bouquet and it would be so pretty. But if you're going to go to the grocery store, you want to buy something bold. Ooh, don't hit the screen. So we grow a lot of really bold flowers for that. Careful what you wish for. This is my like word of caution. If you start growing flowers, it might become a problem. This is how it looks for me now, right? So this is one of two of our 16-foot refrigerated box trucks stuffed to the gills going to Portland. So what started as a hobby for me and something that was a good place for me to get out my aggressions on my weeds and really enjoy being outside became my livelihood. And I love that for me, but it also means that I don't get to like just go out and play in the garden very much. So just word to the wise. Okay. So I want to kind of, a lot of you said that you're growing flowers and you cut them for yourself to enjoy. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, this is a really boring slide, but I promise there are really pretty pictures on the other side. So I'm just going to go through this and then we're going to get into the flowers. And I wanted to go through these things so that as we're talking about individual flower species, we can kind of have these parameters in mind. So thinking about the variety selection of what flowers you're going to grow if you want to cut them, it is worth mentioning that almost any flower can get cut, right? Like you can cut almost anything. Cactus flowers, a little bit more challenging, but you can cut almost anything. And you're going to see examples of that. Where you run into kind of the selection is what kind of colors do you want? What kind of stem life do you want? What kind of vase life do you want? What do you want that flower to do once you've cut it? Because some flowers you can cut and they'll last for a day and you'll enjoy them. And it's an ethereal experience, right? That's what we're enjoying the flower. We're enjoying, I don't know why it's doing that. But sometimes you want a flower to get on your table and last for a week because you want to get the best value out of it. So variety selection is important. A lot of things that you're going to find like at the garden center, you could totally plant and cut, but they may not be intended to be a cut flower. So you might get shorter stems. They might not last as well in a vase. So I have some resources. I brought this whole pile of books. I'm a big fan of books. I bought some seed catalog resources to show you and just to talk through some varieties as we're going through what we grow. Hi, I'm not doing it, I promise. Okay. 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 Um, it would be remiss to talk about growing anything without talking about soil health. I had a really lovely picture that I put in and then I took it back out because it just seemed silly, but soil health is paramount, right? Because if you don't have healthy soil, you aren't going to grow healthy plants, not only because of the nutrition or lack thereof, but also because of the inherent issues with pests and weeds. You're going to have to battle a whole lot more if you don't have healthy soil, which leads to healthy plants that can fight off insects and disease and also grow big and strong and block out the weeds. So having good soil health. So I strongly suggest anybody who's going to grow anything to get a soil test. I know that Master Gardeners has a way to facilitate soil testing, right? Yeah. Okay. Otherwise, there are lots of private labs that you can do it through. I use a lab that's out of Portland. Just depending on what level you're at, it's important to get your soil health tested. You're looking for things like organic matter in your soil, like different nutrient levels, right? So not only your macronutrients, but also thinking about your micronutrients and your pH. So important. The land that I farm on was a Christmas tree farm. And so if anybody's ever tried to grow anything after a Doug fir has lived there, it's what you would say is quite acidic. It's not the best place to grow. And because it was a Christmas tree farm and it had been sprayed and chemically treated for years and years, it was essentially, I mean, it was just moonscape. There was no organic matter in the soil. There was no tangible nutrient. So it's taken years and years of building up the crop or building up the soil through cover cropping, through composting, and through fertilization, just helping our plants to grow bigger and stronger. But the very first year that I grew on that soil, does anybody ever grown a euphorbia? Marginata, like snow on the mountain euphorbia. It's beautiful. It gets, it'll get like 3 feet tall and it's this beautiful kind of minty green with white on it. And I was so excited to plant it. And I got out on my new soil and I planted it and I had plants that were like this tall. And it was atrocious. It was an embarrassing moment as a farmer to grow 3-inch tall euphorbia. So the other thing, I can still see my list, so I'm going to keep talking. Okay, this is, like I said, this is a boring slide anyway. So if you have wet feet, don't grow it in poor drainage. Like just the general cultural things, but also thinking in that about fertilization, because there are a lot of things that you can fertilize once in the beginning of the season, and they're going to be perfectly happy through the rest of the season. But there are also some things that are heavy feeders like sweet peas and roses in particular that are going to want to maintain some fertilization level throughout the season in order for you to maximally benefit from that plant. And then harvest stage and post-harvest treatment are two things that I don't think are talked about enough for just your general person who's wanting to get the most out of your base life. So I have a couple of resources that I'm going to share with you today. You can imagine that as a cut flower grower who's making my living out of selling flowers to people, I need to have the highest quality of flower available. I need to be in there convincing my customer that they should buy my flower over anybody else's because it's going to be the nicest. It's going to have the best base life. It's going to be the nicest form. It's going to have all of the things that they want. So I've spent a great deal of time educating myself on how to do that. And there are two books that these are resource books that are available through different platforms, but this one is called Post-Harvest Handling of Cut Flowers and Greens. And it's written by John Dole, who's a professor at North Carolina State and has spent the majority of his career researching post-harvest treatment of cut flowers. And that's everything from the stage of harvest to post-harvest treatment. So like the little like sachets of whatever powdered stuff that you get when you buy a vase or a bouquet at the store and put in your vase water. John is one of the preeminent researchers on those formulations, which are all proprietary. And so you aren't going to find a formula for them necessarily. But I will say that the most important factor in post-harvest treatment of flowers is the stage of harvest. So making sure that you're harvesting it at a place within its life cycle where it is going to be the freshest and have the longest base life. And I have some examples I'm going to show you very dependent on the kind of flower that you're growing. So we'll talk through it as we're going through flowers. And then this is one that is very near and dear to my heart. It's called Floral Standards. This one was written by the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market. So the group of us, all 18 of us, came together and this was our COVID project. When we couldn't do anything and we couldn't go anywhere, we all spent the entire year vase testing and bench testing our flowers against each other with different treatments. And so you're welcome to look at this book afterwards. It is intended to be a professional resource. What we are finding is that as we put it out for sale, we've had a ton of home gardeners buy it because this is essentially a what's what of things that you can grow in your garden to cut. There's everything from daffodils to like witch hazel, grapevines, nigella, like nasturtiums, everything that you would maybe think to grow, and then a whole bunch of stuff that you're like, oh, I didn't think I could cut that. So I have those up here. I'd love for you to look at them afterwards, but let's get into the really fun part. So which flowers? Again, you should grow what you like. Bold statement flowers, soft meadowy flowers, scented flowers. That's a big one. Too many of our flowers today do not have a scent. So I strongly encourage you to find things that you love scent-wise. There's lots of things out there and lots of flowers that we aren't used to thinking about the scent of because it's not something that we've ever seen, right? There's lots of different things but we're going to go into annuals. I'm just going to go to it because I want to talk about flowers. So this is just a very easy baseline list of annuals that you can grow. So again, annuals, plants that are going to grow this season and go away, but you have 3, 4, 5 months to get the most out of these. And most of these are what we would consider cut and come again. So these are like the workhorses of the cut flower garden because you can plant them once or twice. We plant in successions on the farm to ensure that we have like freshest blooms throughout the year, and you can do that in your home garden as well. But there are 2 things on this list that I would say well, 3 things that are not really cut and come again. And that would be sweet peas, although they can be, but they're very weather sensitive, so they don't like to get hot. Godetia, which is really truly like the definition of cut and never come again. It's just going to be done once you've cut it. And then sunflowers, depending on whether you grow branching sunflowers or single stem sunflowers. So I'll talk about that a little bit. So let's talk about the different things. So Cosmos, very basic, beautiful cut flower. Cosmos, the biggest issue that I see people cut with Cosmos is not cutting it early enough. So all of these, I'm going to take my little thing and I'm going to walk. First of all, can I just get a little bit of props for that picture, right? Like I stood there for way too long, just so you know. I'm sure that all of my crew members were like, what is she doing? She's like the most inefficient person. But look at all this pollen. This is what I wanted to bring out. Like that is so exciting. When we moved onto this land, there were no animals. There were no pollinators. There were no bees. There were no birds. There were no snakes. There were like 2 jackrabbits and a coyote, and that was it. And now we are just like teeming with wildlife, and it's so exciting. We had elk in our fields 2 years ago, not preferable.
No.
Exciting and very exciting to see, but we don't want them. But it was still cool to see because we're creating this environment where animals want to come and pollinators want to be. See what I did? Okay, so thinking about the cosmos, so you can see cosmos, the beautiful part of the flower is not the flower. The flower is the yellow, teeny tiny little pieces inside. And so that's where all the pollen is housed. So you can see that the pollen on these is opening, like where you can see them a little bit more fluffy. And so when we harvest for cuts, we're harvesting them at this stage. So they're closed still. And when you're looking at this disc, and this is going to be true of a lot of the flowers we're going to talk about today, when you're looking at that disc, you don't want any of these little florets to be open. They want to be tight because as soon as they start opening, they start sending out pollen and the flower starts to fail. So, I mean, it's all relative, right? As soon as you cut that flower, it's dead. But the longer vase life is going to come from harvest stage. So this is too far gone. You could totally cut that and you're going to enjoy it for 3 or 4 days. But if you cut it at this point, you could and then treat it properly at post-harvest. So clean pruners, clean water. That's the biggest issue, is clean water. I know that there's a ton of homemade solutions that people say you should use with, let's see, Sprite, aspirin, vinegar. Scientifically, those are not a good option. So when we have seen research done on them at university levels, they are not elongating the vase life of your flowers. If you do it and it works for you, that's great. I'm not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't do, but I'm just saying from a scientific point of view, having a clean vase with clean water is better than putting a bunch of stuff in there and hoping it works. Stage of harvest, clean water, yes.
As you go, can you tell us what the smallest size bud is on a given flower?
That would still open, yeah. For the cosmos, see how this one is kind of, all the petals are popped, where this one, they're kind of still tight. It would be right in between those. So this one may open, but it's gonna have to be like right at the precipice. So generally speaking, you're gonna see at least one, and I'm gonna call it a petal, like one petal lifted. With the cosmos, you know, they have, usually there's 2 or 3 that we'll try to cut from. Yeah.
I'm wondering if anybody from the garden ecology lab has been up to your field.
From the what lab?
Ecology lab,
No,
Gail.
I don't know them. No,
Gallardo.
I'm happy to, love to be put in touch. Yeah. Sunflowers. So we grow 2 different kinds of sunflowers. We grow pollen-y sunflowers and pollen-less sunflowers. And 90% of the sunflowers that we grow are pollenless. Because when you buy a sunflower at a market or at a grocery store and you bring it home, generally speaking, people don't want them to drop a bunch of pollen on their table. So this is, for the most part, these are all called Pro-Cut series. These were developed by Sunflower Selections, which is a breeder of sunflowers. And these are Pro-Cut Orange, Pro-Cut Gold, Pro-Cut Plum, Pro-Cut Lemon Bicolor. You can see the variety here as to how many different varieties of sunflowers there are. The color scheme is immense. You can go all the way from black to, I don't think there's any of them in here, but there's some newer developed ones that are called White Night and White Light that are like a creamy, kind of whitish green color that are really stunning. Word of caution, cucumber beetles. Those ones, love them so much. So I put this up here because you can see this was at a farmer's market day and we had a really, really big explosion of sunflowers and we had to get rid of them. So they had to go. But most of these are way past where we would harvest them for actual wholesale sales. So this is like when you were out buying flowers. One of my biggest pet peeves is when I see people at farmers markets selling flowers that are like way too open and have way too much pollen, because it's really diminishing the customer's experience with the vase life of any given flower. So I put in, I mean, this is super pretty, but, oh, wait, okay. No, wait, come back. Yeah. So this is a stage of harvest that we would harvest for our use. And if we harvest this is almost right on the edge of a little bit too open for us. And it's when you watch the petals lift off the disc, they are flush and then they start to lift. And as soon as they start to lift, we start to think about cutting them because sunflowers will continue to open in a vase. So this is a stage that we would harvest them at. And you can see in this example, none of the florets are open. See how that there's just no pollen coming out. These are pollenless, so obviously there wouldn't be pollen, but the florets are not open. So the petals are nice and tight. And that's gonna give my customer a week of a beautiful sunflower. And that's what I want, right? I want them to have a great experience, so they're gonna come back. Okay, snapdragons. I'm a big fan of snapdragons. Does anybody here love snapdragons? Yeah, oh my gosh. Snapdragons are quintessential to me to any cut flower garden because they are very relatively easy to grow. They have an enormous array of colors, like as exemplified here. You can get such a range of colors. They have long stems if you select your variety properly. They have good vase life, and they can and should have a scent, in my opinion. In my opinion, snapdragons should smell. And so to exemplify that, this one right here is one of my favorite scented. It has a really strong smell. This is called Madam Butterfly. There's a whole series of Madam Butterflies. This is Madam Butterfly Cherry Bronze. And there's also, you know, white and yellow and pink and another bronze that I think is very similar, but just a really nice snapdragon with a really beautiful smell. And then these are more standard snapdragons. One thing about snapdragons that I want to point out is that snapdragons are classified by groups. So you might see in your seed catalog, so I have some seed catalogs here, and when I go to snapdragon, which you're gonna, botanical name Antirrhinum, they have different series numbers on them. So if you're looking at like rockets, which is a very common nursery available snapdragon, I think that rockets are a series 4. Maybe they're 3, but I think they're 4. So what those numbers mean is that those snapdragons are bred for blooming in certain parts of the year. So they start at 0, they go to 4. So if you are like me and you're putting, sorry, I keep forgetting that's there. You're putting snapdragons into a greenhouse and you're forcing them in the winter, you want a smaller number of series. So a lot of the series that I grow are 1s and 2s because they bloom under shorter days. They can handle blooming. They bloom in cooler weather. They don't like the hot weather. But rockets, great bedding plants because they are a 4. And so they do like that hotter seasonality later in the season. So Madam Butterflies, I believe, are a 3. I think. So those are ones that we only grow out in the field in the summer. But let's see, these right here, these are chantillies, and you can see hopefully you can see the difference. These are single open-faced snapdragons. So they're just a little bit of a different shape than the Madam Butterflies. And they are a series 1. So like I have these in my greenhouse right now that I planted in October, and they'll be blooming here in another 6 weeks or so because they can handle the lower light in this time of year, and they will still induce blooming. So thinking about those kind of things, I know that's really technical, but there are a few flower groups that are like that, or flower varieties that are like that have groups. So it's worth noting. The reason I put this picture in is because you can see in my fields, we use it's called Hortanova. It's a plastic netting, and it's imperative for certain crops. And snapdragons are one of them, because if you don't support snapdragons, what they do is what's happening in this middle picture, where Beatrice is in like a sea of snapdragons that have fallen down. And they're still beautiful, but their stems are like this, and they're of very little use to me. You could still make a beautiful bouquet with them. And I realized that using Hortanova, like you can see, this is like probably a 120-foot row of snapdragons. It's not the most attractive thing to have in your yard, but just knowing that snapdragons do need some sort of support is really important. Okay, zinnias. I don't grow a lot of zinnias because they don't have a lot of wholesale value for me. But when I do, I grow weird colored ones. So you can see on the right, all these bright colors. This is like your quintessential zinnia, like the bright hot pinks, the bright hot reds, those kind of flowers. These ones, this is so pretty. Look at that little heart just saying hi to me. This is Queen Red. So this is a series called the Queen series. And this picture that I had before where Lauren is holding all of these are also all queens. These are Queen Limes, Queen Oranges, and Queen Blush or Blotch. I think that they originally called it Blotch and then they moved it to Blush because Blotch sounded so not attractive, maybe. There's a lot of development happening in zinnias right now with color palettes. This is a development that we trialed last year for Johnny's Select Seeds that has these kind of more blushy colors and these like more coral and orange tropical tones. And then that last picture, I wanted to point out, this is part of when we were researching for this book. This is part of our research for this. I guess I put it in upside down. It says tea bag. And so a tea bag is, it's a kind of floral post-harvest treatment. It's made by Kreisel, which is a company out of Florida that develops post-harvest treatment. And what we did with this experiment is that we cut zinnias at the same stage of harvest, put some of them into plain water, some of them into well water, some of them into creek water, some of them into water treated with tea bags, and some of them into water treated with another preservative. And then we watched to see what happened. Zinnias are very dirty, dirty flowers. If you've ever grown zinnias, you know that the stems are kind of hairy and thus they catch all of the things that are in your water, which is so important to have clean water. So if you have dirty water, those zinnias, all the little hairs on their stems are like, yum, bacteria, delicious. And then that bacteria sucks up into like the straw that is the plant's stem and just clogs it. And so then you don't have good water uptake, and then your flower is not going to last as long. So just like basic, but zinnias are particularly bad. So we treat all of our zinnias with what's called the CVBN tablet. So it's essentially just a tiny little tablet of bleach that goes into the bucket, and it helps to kill off the bacteria. And then we treat them with tea bag, which is Kreisel #2, which is a professional post-harvest treatment. It's called a tea bag because it comes in like, it literally is like a little tea bag. So it's all pre-portioned and we just throw them in the buckets. But just thinking about if you're growing zinnias for cuts, if you've ever had issues with them not lasting or with them melting down, it may be a cleanliness issue. Not saying you're dirty, but they're dirty. These are just a couple of examples of other flowers. This is dianthus on the bottom here, and this is godetia, which I mentioned is a flower that really comes into its own for a hot minute and then it's gone. But godetia is really beautiful and it dries really well. So I wanted to make sure to put that in there. I know that I'm running kind of tight on time, so I want to make sure I have enough time for Q&A, but I could talk about flowers all day. So yeah.
So dahlias can be difficult for some people. Zinnias, you're saying, are dirty. Can you recommend another flower that maybe is easier, that has a similar look?
We're going to get to dahlias and I'm going to talk to you about dahlias. So I don't give up on dahlias yet. The dahlias are my single biggest favoritist flower. So, but there are a couple of other things and I'll point out as we go. Yeah. Oh, sorry, amaranth. Amaranth is just a really fun plant because, I mean, look at it. Look at how fun this is. It was like a party in our field. Amaranth has the added bonus of being an incredible seed producer, which produces a lot of really great forage for animals and birds, especially in the fall and winter. So I love having amaranth in our fields. I love it until the next year when they all start growing again. And I'm like, wow, we have 47,000 plants in this bed. But amaranth is a really wonderful cut when you cut it early. And I was trying to catch it in this picture, and I'm not sure if it's really apparent, but once the seeds start to really develop, the vase life of amaranth, not only does the vase life go down, but then you also risk having like a lot of shed and a lot of seed shed. So getting them tighter is really important. And so some of these plumes that are coming up, it's really hard to see in this picture. If you've ever grown amaranth, you can look at them and see when they're tight. But there's a really particular stage of harvest that's just before they start to develop the seeds really strongly. That's going to be the best time to get them. Also, I will say if you do grow dangling or trailing amaranth, you do want to make sure to keep it up off the ground because man, that stuff soaks up the mud and the water and it can be really messy. I put these pictures in here just to remind you that not just because you aren't cultivating it on purpose doesn't mean that you can't cut it for beauty in your vase. This is Ami. So this is particularly Ami or Ami, depending on how you like to spell it or say it. But this is Visnaga, which is the variety of that. And this is Daucus, which looks probably very familiar to you if you've ever looked in the ditch along any road in Oregon in the summertime, because Queen Anne's lace and Daucus are the same thing. This is just a one that's been developed with the purple color. So, I mean, if I'm being totally honest, we cut so much Daucus out of the ditch and sell it every year. So much. So just because it's not that you didn't buy the seed in the seed pack and plant it doesn't mean you can't cut it. Remember, with Daucus though, you do want to cut it. It's an umbel. So you want to cut it after it's unfurled, but before it starts to like, oh no, the wind got my umbrella and flips it backwards. So it's kind of like a tight moment before it starts to shed the petals. Ami, once it starts to shed, you can see these ones right here, all of the umbel florets are nice and tight. Once it starts to shed, it's just a mess is what it is. Okay, marigolds. I love marigolds and I will shout it from the rooftops. They're like one of my favorite flowers and I don't think that they get enough attention, but they are amazing flowers. They are great for pollinators. They are great for biocontrol. Like you can plant these so I plant these along the edge of some of my more exposed beds for animals and deer. The deer and my deer, I always need to qualify that my deer don't bother my marigolds or my dahlias. So I tend to use them as like little hedgerows to keep them out. Marigolds have amazing vase life. They have beautiful stems. There are some really amazing varieties that have been developed This particular variety is developed by Peace Seedlings here in Corvallis. So if you are not familiar with Peace Seedlings, they're at the farmer's market. They have this marigold is like, it changed my life when it came to marigolds. I was kind of like, oh, marigolds are fine. But I started growing that variety, and then I started growing some of these other bigger marigolds. These particularly are called Chedi, Chedi. They used to be called Jedi, but I think that was like a trademark thing, so they had to change it. But marigolds are just amazing. And if we grow a lot for the end of season for Day of the Dead, and they're incredibly popular. Yeah, did you have a question? Oh, no, you were just gesticulating. So, and then sweet peas. How many people grow sweet peas? Yeah, I love sweet peas. Sweet peas are really amazing, like cold weather crops. So like my sweet peas are in the ground right now and they will bloom. Usually I can stretch them into July, but I get the best blooms out of them in like May and the beginning of June. Sweet peas are an interesting crop right now in this moment for me as a cut flower grower because seed supplies are really challenging. There's a lot of quarantining that goes on that when seeds are coming in from out of the country. And in particular, sweet peas get held up because they are a legume. And so they want to fumigate them all and they want to have really tight controls, which I'm totally down with. I don't want bad stuff coming in, but I have had multiple packages seized at customs coming from England, where a lot of sweet pea breeding happens. There's also a lot of really great sweet pea breeding that's going on in Australia and in Japan. Oh my gosh, the sweet peas coming out of Japan are beautiful. But the biggest thing about sweet peas is to grow them early and in cool weather, and then to not expect a huge amount of vase life out of them. Sweet peas are kind of that like ethereal moment of spring where you're growing them and you bring them in and your entire house smells like sweet peas and it evokes such emotion. And so, I mean, I'm like so excited about my sweet peas every year. So that's what flowers can do for us, right? Is to bring us into the moment. So sweet peas are amazing. And then celosia, how many people, or celosia, depends on how you say it. Two main variety kind of types of celosia. So we call them the brains at my farm, but crested celosia. So it will have brain shape, or they'll be kind of like this little coral shaped look, or plume shaped. So these are plumes. Celosia are not super in love with our climate here in the Willamette Valley because it's not quite hot and dry enough. I know that sounds silly when we think about the summers that we've been experiencing, but if you ever go to like Eastern Oregon or Texas, oh my gosh, they can grow celosia that's like taller than I am and heads as big as mine. And it's challenging sometimes for us to get the celosia to full maturity unless we plant it really early. And so this one is actually in one of our tunnels. So this is planted for a fall crop. And then this, I would love to say that this is my beautiful automated fully production greenhouse, but it is not. I went to Amsterdam last year and was able to tour a couple of really top quality greenhouse operations. And this is their celosia production. And it was mind boggling and also like terrifying. I don't want to be at that level, but it was super cool to see. Okay. So then perennials. I only have like 20 minutes, so I'm going to zoom. Yes.
Can you just say a little bit about vase life and celosia
Vase life on celosia. Yeah.
for long and sorry.
Well, the biggest thing with celosia is to make sure that you are getting it at the right stage. So it needs to be fully mature or else it'll be kind of floppy. So it's the easiest to see with the plumes because the plumes you can see like this one right here, there's a ton of foliage and not very much flower. Where this one right here, you can see that it's elongated out of the foliage and the plume has started to develop. So stage of harvest for those would be like this one we would cut, but this one we wouldn't, and that one we wouldn't. This one we would, that one we probably wouldn't. And so one is to catch it when it's mature enough, but then to not catch it too late. And actually, in reality, we dry a ton of celosia, especially crested celosia. So the stage of harvest is mostly for that, is just before it starts to, the color starts to diminish, especially on these like yellows, they'll start to turn brown and get ugly. Or because we have such moist balls, they'll start to get mold on them if we don't cut them in time. So really, it's mostly just cutting them after they've matured. And with the crested, there'll be a little bit of give to them, and then they'll harden up when they're ready to. And that's the same with zinnias. I forgot to mention that on zinnias. Has anyone here ever used the wiggle test on zinnias? Yeah. Oh, that was raise that hand high. I love it. Zinnia's stage of harvest can be a little bit challenging too. And when you are harvesting zinnias, you can grab the stem, maybe like 6-8 inches below the flower, and shake it. And if it goes like this, it's not ready to harvest. You need to wait until it's like this. The whole stem is going to move, and it is not ready to harvest until the whole stem moves. So we call it the wiggle test. If it wiggles at all, don't cut it. It doesn't, and you will see that the flowers will look fully mature and they will still wiggle. And if you cut them, they will fail. So, and something to try. It's very exciting that way. Did that answer your question on celosia? Okay. Perennials and foliages for extra va-va-voom. So we all probably have perennials in our gardens. The biggest difference as far as cut flower production goes is that in a garden context, annuals are going to continue to pump out the flowers and continue to produce. Perennials usually, most of them, have a window of time when they mature. And they come on and they're amazing and they're beautiful and they lend an aspect to your garden or to your vase that you can't get from an annual, really. Like most of these have amazing qualities, but they're fairly short as far as the window of time. So I really encourage people to have, if they were wanting to have a long season of cut flowers, to really think about your perennials and how those are complementing your annuals as you're going through your season. So this is just some examples of ones that we grow on our farm. Sedum, we grow a ton of eucalyptus, and I'm happy to talk about eucalyptus if people have more questions. Raspberry and blackberry, hugely productive for cut flowers. We grow probably 3,000 to 4,000 row feet of raspberry and about 1,500 row feet of thornless blackberries that are used exclusively for cuts. So I have some pictures and I'll show you because thornless blackberries, that's the key. Raspberries, we are cutting the foliage when it's young enough that we grow, most of them do have thorns, but they're so immature that the thorns are soft and so they're not really an issue. But there are a couple of really good thornless varieties as well. Peonies, mint, mint, you just need to make sure that it's hardened off and that you don't, that you know what you're getting into if you plant it. Just know that you're going to have a huge patch of mint. So commit if you want it, commit. Alstroemeria, delphinium. I am a big fan of delphinium. I've only been successful growing them over the last maybe 3 to 4 seasons. And now I'm just like all in on delphinium. Hypericum columbine, roses I'll touch on. And then I wanted to point out chrysanthemums because I love chrysanthemums. But this is a good example of how, here's this really pretty white zinnia, right? But like, think about it just by itself. It's just a flower, right? But you add in some immature sedum and some thornless blackberries, and you get this like textural feast. Like there's so much going on here. And it's so much to do with the things that aren't flowers, right? Like the sedum, yeah, it's a flower, but it's texture in this case. And the Amy, that's what this is right here. It's a flower, but it's texture. So thinking about like how you're gonna boost up your flowers, because they're still the main focal point, but man, they look so much better with a little bit of like, you know, boom around them. This is what the raspberry looks like. So these are raspberries that we've cut. Scented geranium is another foliage that I use a lot of. Important to point that out. This is delphinium. I'm gonna slip through these slides because these are just really pretty flower pictures. This is part of our delphinium production and then roses behind them. This is another picture of delphinium. Roses, I'll mention roses because a lot of people think of roses as cut flower. Like that's like when they think of cut flowers, they think of roses. And we don't grow a lot of like grocery store roses. We grow for our production mostly garden roses, mostly David Austin roses. We have a couple of hybrids and floribundas that we grow. This one right here is Coco Loco. And then I think this is white licorice maybe. But we grow roses for events almost exclusively because they just don't have the most amazing base life, and we are selling them for a price. In order to sell them, we charge a premium. So my customers have to recognize that they're going to be the highest quality, but they're really for only like that splash in a bucket of a day of enjoying them. This is my dog Larry. Isn't he cute? And these are Princess Charlene de Monaco roses. This is one of my favorite cuts. It's amazing, and she's super productive and has a great scent and is incredibly disease resistant in my climate and gives me 3 flushes of roses every year. Yeah. And look how cute Larry is. Yes.
Could you repeat the name?
It's called Princess Charlene de Monaco. This is a eucalyptus production, and I just wanted to touch on eucalyptus because we are right at the edge of hardiness for most eucalyptus, but they are hardy here, and they make an incredible cut. This is like our largest main patch. This is 2 different sections. This section right here is 7 years. This is its 8th season, and this section, don't look at the weeds, just the eucalyptus. This is in its 4th year. In these pictures. We coppice our eucalyptus every year, so it gets cut back to about waist height in order to encourage it to branch out. We don't want 40-foot trees, we want 10-foot shrubs. So there are a couple of varieties that are the most hardy. Nicolii is one, that's willow euc. That one's very hardy. Cinerea is also very hardy. There are a couple of really like species identification on eucalyptus is challenging, and seed is not always what you have bought. So I have quite a few varieties that I purchased as Cinerea. I have probably 4 different varieties that all were marked as Cinerea. So what they are really, who knows? You can't really identify them until they start to flower, and not all of them have started to flower. But biggest thing with euc is to make sure they have good drainage, make sure that you mulch them well, and pick your varieties well so that you have hardy ones. Yes.
Do you get them to produce seeds?
Yes. So right now they have flowers on them. Like if you've ever seen a eucalyptus flower, it's like a hard little nub that's housed inside of the leaf on the stem. And so they are just now setting, they have flowers on them. And then by the fall, we might have seeds if we don't cut them, but usually we cut them. Peonies. Okay, I wanted to stop really quick at peonies because peonies are amazing. They grow super well in our climate. If you don't have peonies in your garden, you should have peonies in your garden. How many people have peonies in their garden? Great. Just note on harvest of peonies, this is like how we think of peonies, right? These smell so amazing. You could just stick your nose in there and they'd smell so good. This is my favorite variety of peonies, is etched salmon. I just love it so much. But this is what I wanted to look at, is the stage of harvest on peonies, because every single peony in this picture is too open for me to harvest it. This peony right here is this one and this one are the closest to how I would harvest them for my wholesale customers, because the green, see the green that's on the outside? If those are closed up and they have, we call it the marshmallow stage. So if you squeeze your peony and it feels like a hard like a marshmallow that you're just about to make a s'mores out of, then it's ready to cut, and you can cut it then, and you'll get the best vase life out of it. And if you cut it at that stage, you can also store it dry in a refrigerator for up to 2 months. So peonies are an incredible crop, and they're incredible cut flowers. So if you have a big peony bush in your yard this year, I strongly encourage you, when you're like, I just can't deal with any more peonies, go out and cut a couple just ahead of this stage, wrap them in paper and put them into your crisper in your refrigerator. And then like in 2 or 3 weeks, take them out and recut them and put them in water and watch them open. Once they get back into water, you will not get as long in your vase with them, but you will still be able to enjoy them opening for 3 or 4 days. So, and chrysanthemums, these are not, it's so funny, you know how people are like, this is not your grandmother's meatloaf, or this isn't your grandma's mac and cheese. These are your grandmother's chrysanthemums, and you should grow them. There's actually quite a deficit of what we call heirloom chrysanthemums going on in America right now. With the degradation of the American flower trade in the 80s, a lot of chrysanthemum growers in the US went out of business. And with them went a lot of these amazing heirloom varieties that had been grown for generations and passed down from generation to generation. And now we're stuck with Colombian grocery store chrysanthemums as what we know as chrysanthemums. But there are still little tiny strongholds of people who are propagating these and selling them. And they, for the most part, are very hardy and they want to be grown people. We want to grow them. So if you love chrysanthemums, I strongly encourage you to go out and find growers. I have 2 growers that I have on my resource page that I think are amazing, but they are one of my favorite flowers. Oh, I'm going to just fly through it. Daffodils, narcissus, tulips, ranunculus, anemones, dahlias, and crocosmia are all bulbs, corms, and tubers that you could grow very successfully for cuts. Daffodils obviously grow very well here. Tulips grow very well here. I just put this one up to show tulips do well in our climate, but if you, like, we force our tulips in greenhouses when we want to sell them because we want them to be all coming on at a certain time. And we plant them like this. This is obviously outside, but we plant them in like an eggshell fashion to get as much out of them because we don't save the bulbs because they won't produce well in subsequent years. Ranunculus, really, you can grow ranunculus. They really love to be in a little bit more of a like pampered environment than just out in the yard. But they can grow in the yard. You see pot ranunculus all the time. These are clonies. These are Italian ranunculus that we grow in hoops in tunnels. And they are little plants right now and they'll be blooming around Mother's Day. Okay, dahlias. I really wanted to get to the dahlia part and to your question about dahlias. So dahlias are one of the things, if you were to look at this floral standards book, there's an entire section on dahlias where we spent so much time on dahlias. I probably have 3 acres of dahlias. We have about 40,000 dahlias in the ground from year to year. So dahlias are my single biggest crop. They're like my single passion as far as making sure that my customers have the best experience with them. So a couple of things with dahlias. Variety selection is paramount. So ball dahlias are going to have the best vase life, period. There's like no argument there. So ball dahlias and sometimes palm dahlias, but those can be really, really weird too. But balls are going to be your best bet. There are also, so there are some like formal dahlias. So this right here, oh, I don't know his name. This is Salmon Runner. It's actually has a pretty decent vase life. This is Cornell. And then this is, I think, Jowie's Chantel. I can't really tell which one that is. But with dahlias, if you want to have good vase life, you want to pick well. So looking at these, these ones down here are going to last the best because they are that ball, like honeycomb shape. These ones up here, you're going to get less vase life out of them. You can see that their petals are like fibrillated and they're like cactus style. Still get good vase life out of them if we treat them properly, but not as good. So this is what we want to get to, is stage of harvest with dahlias. This is where it can be really challenging from variety to variety. And in our floral standards, we went over this and you could see it if you look at the chart. But dahlias, historically, people have been like, dahlias don't open if you cut them. Once you cut them, they're done. And we have found that that's not totally true. It is true with some varieties, but there are plenty of varieties that are going to keep on opening. This is Hillcrest Suffusion. This is a really prolific, beautiful dahlia that we grow a ton of. We harvest, so this is even like a little bit of a late stage 1 going into stage 2. All of our dahlias are harvested at stage 2. Maybe stage 3, depending on the dahlia. There are some that will hold longer harvested into stage 3, but by the time a dahlia gets to stage 4 or stage 5, it gets deadheaded and it's done because the diminishment of vase life is so rapid when you get to stage 4 that it's just not worth it. So it's hard to see on this picture, but again, if you look at the ball dahlia, it fully open, you can see that the petals wrap all the way around to the stem. At stage 1, it's flat. There's no petals that have opened beyond the stem. So it's going to continue to kind of puff and open. And this stage right here is the best stage to cut them at. We also treat all of our dahlias with Chrysal number 2, which is the flower food preservative. And we put a CVBN, which is the bleach tab, into our water because we want to make sure that we don't have bacteria in there. And that brings me to like one of the biggest wives' tales that drives me absolutely bonkers bananas is that there are some dahlia resources that encourage people to sear the ends of their dahlias or put them into boiling water. And I want us all just to think about that from a scientific point of view, that when you heat cells, they start to disintegrate, right? It starts to break down. And then they turn into detritus. And then, so if you are heating up that stem and then you're putting it in cold water, all of that rotting stem is dissolving into your water and causing bacteria to grow in your water. So if you take one thing from this, please don't put your dahlia stems in hot water. Yeah.
Is it true that daffodils should not be mixed with other flowers?
Yes and no. Daffodils exude a sap. If anybody's ever picked a daffodil, you know, it exudes that sap. Once that sap is run out, they're fine to use with other flowers. So what we do in our production is all of the daffodils, we put them into a bucket of water, and then we let them kind of rinse themselves out, and then we put them in a second bucket of water to store. And then if we're using them in mixed bouquets, they will have flushed out enough that we can put them in with mixed bouquets. It's the same with things like euphorbia that have like a latexy bleed to them, and tweedia or oxypetalum, which is, I don't know what a common name for that is besides tweedia, but things that kind of exude that latexy grossness. Yeah.
How edible are the bulbs?
Dahlia tubers are edible.
Yeah, I mean.
I'm in a I have tried them, and I have had much more delicious tubers. Let's put it that, like, I would rather eat a sweet potato or something like that, but they are edible, and they are native to Mexico, and they were used as a crop in Mexico for food. So if you ever want to try a dahlia tuber, feel free. And if you come up with a really great recipe, let me know. Yeah.
Floral Life?
Floral Life is kind of a similar product to Kreisel, just a different company produces it. Yeah. Yeah.
With that euphorbia type of white
Mhm.
sap, do they have any vase life?
They do. Yeah.
How do you keep that white stuff from?
So we do a similar process to daffodils. We harvest those first thing in the morning before they've had any chance to warm up, and we put them directly into water. And with those especially, the thing that we grow the most that is sap like that is tweedia, which is like a beautiful blue flower that has that latexy sap. And you will see the water will turn cloudy with how much sap comes out of them. And so we'll flush them. We will put them in the bucket, and then we'll kind of swish them and let them sit, and then we'll move them into clean water. Yeah. Okay. Oh, this is the diva of all divas, right? The dinner plate dahlia. These are so beautiful, and they are just amazing, and you just want to enjoy them. And so I strongly encourage you, if you love dahlias and you love dinner plate dahlias, by all means, grow these in your garden. Cut them and enjoy them, but know that you're only going to get them for 2 days, maybe. This is like, we grow, just to put it in perspective, like, first of all, to get a perfect bloom like this, I bet you that I probably deadheaded 15 to 20 blooms to get this one perfect bloom. So it's just not like a profitable flower for us, but it's one of the highest in demand dahlias that I have for wedding work is the cafe au lait. And my designers that buy them are willing to pay, similar to garden roses, they're willing to pay a high price because they know the beauty of them, but they also know that they can only expect a day or two out of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed dahlias get thrips a lot.
And yes, they do.
You manage your insect.
So a couple of things with thrips. Thrips have an incredibly complicated life cycle. So it's like 7 stages of pupae and instars and all of the things. So you have to break it up. You have to be able to attack them at multiple stages within that life cycle in order to stop their production. So we use beneficials. So Orias is one, so that's a minute pirate bug. We use those. There's another one that I have that I can't remember. I have a really wonderful woman named Margaret Parks who works for Evergreen Growers, which is out of Clackamas. They're a beneficial insect company, and she has helped me come up with a program for our thrips. But the biggest thing is that we have cultivated a native population of Orias, which are minute pirate bugs. And we also just have a threshold of like dealing with them, especially in the spring. They attack the white flowers the most. Snapdragons and dahlias are their favorite, and white is like a beacon in the night for them. You can also use Captain Jack Spinosad to spray them if you're into spraying them. But we try really hard to use the beneficial nematodes. There's also beneficial nematodes that can help to get that instar that happens in the soil. Yeah.
I couldn't understand what you were saying. You said we have had a good crop of something.
Oh, for the thrips?
Yeah.
We have a native population of minute pirate bugs.
I knew what?
Minute pirate bugs, so they're Orius is their species, Orius. And we've cultivated over the years, but they timing wise don't come into their full like population until just after the thrips do. So we always have just a small window of time when we just get pummeled by thrips. Thrips are like one of the worst. Thrips and cucumber beetles are our two biggest insect issues.
You dig and replant your dahlia bulbs?
Yes and no.
How often? So
Yeah, so we do dig some every single year and store them. But we also, because we're just, I mean, we're warm enough that generally speaking, we can overwinter them with, we do mulch them to make sure that we have a cover in case we do get really cold. But we dig them in the fall, store them in this winter, and then plant them in the spring, or we overwinter. So because we have so much production, we just can't physically take them all out. So we plant in rotations. And we leave them in, our goal is to never leave them in more than 2 years.
What do you mulch them with?
We use compost to mulch them. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, question over there.
Yeah, your statement about not heat treating
Mhm.
dahlias,
Mhm.
does it apply to basically all cut flowers or not?
The only thing that I use heat on is poppies.
And
Poppies, papaver, because they seal them. Otherwise, one, you're breaking down the cells and creating issues with water uptake. And two, you're dirtying the water. But with poppies, we cut the poppies before they shed their covers. And so once, I mean, but they just basically will open and do their thing. So they get seared with a little blowtorch. Yeah. Ugh. Okay, sorry. I know that I only have no minutes left, but I just wanted to really quickly throw out there a couple of really fun things. Ornamental cabbages, if you've never grown ornamental cabbages, super fun. They get planted we plant them in our field in July and they color up and we harvest them like around Halloween. Lisianthus, if you are not familiar with Lisianthus, which I was not familiar with Lisianthus until I started growing cut flowers, you should be. They are amazing. They have an incredible vase life, like 2 weeks in a vase. They look like roses. They have a huge amount of color spectrum, but they are really challenging to start from seeds. So if you're looking to buy Lisianthus plugs, there's a really great resource called Garden Club by Farmer Bailey, where you can grow. Farmer Bailey is a broker that brokers plugs for cut flowers. And they have so they're like a wholesale, but they have a retail shop called Garden Club, and they sell them in like 6-packs. If you're up for a challenge, if you're like, I'm a master seed starter and I want to challenge, Lisianthus that's your gateway into, again, danger. But Lisianthus do take a really long time, and that's why I put up this picture, is because we grow them through weed mat in order to make sure that we have a little bit of a jump on the weeds because they grow really slow. And then Bells of Ireland. I know. I'm really bad. So here's a resource page. There we go. Does anyone have any other questions? I know I went over. I apologize. Yeah.
Lizzie Ann.
Uh-huh.
Trying to grow the seed.
Uh-huh.
Possible. So you said garden club, is that the website?
Garden Club. So right here, it's like halfway down, right under Wild Garden, it says Farmer Bailey Garden Club. Farmer Bailey is the company, and then Garden Club is the retail section of their company. So you can buy, they have Lisianthus, they have all sorts of really cool plants that you can buy in smaller quantities. Anybody else? What's that?